Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and today I'm going to review Giant Size X-Men Jean Grey Emma Frost #1 from writer Jonathan Hickman and artist Russell Dauterman with Matthew Wilson on colors. So I came into this comic book, I was excited, but I didn't really understand why it has the Giant Size, X-Men name on it. What makes it Giant Size X-Men? When they announced it, I was expecting a comic book that was, 60 to 80 pages, giant size X-Men, but soon discovered this was never meant to be that many pages. It's a 32-page comic book. So what separates giant size X-Men from the other comic books? Apparently it's going to tell, one-shot stories about X-Men characters. Well, what separates that from Jonathan Hickman's X-Men? Is it that it has a different artist this time? There seems to be plenty of individual X-Men issues that have different artists. So I came into this comic with a little bit of brain confusion, and I still have it. I don't know why this just isn't, X-Men #8. I assume it's because they wanted to charge, $5 cover price instead of $4. It's only a few pages more than a normal X-Men comic, and it certainly didn't even need those. I could, probably cut it down to 24 pages pretty easily. But I will say this. I really like this comic book. I love silent issues. I remember there's a Matt Kent silent issue of Ninja K that I still love. I pull it out of the collection every, few months and I read it again because I just really enjoyed the story and how visceral it was reading it. It's just so action packed and I really love that Ninja K issue. And this is a silent issue of X-Men. So in that respect, I do really enjoy it. In fact, I would highly recommend this comic book, even though I can honestly say X-Men readers can probably skip this comic because there's only one real big reveal at the very end that readers need to know about. So how can I say I highly recommend this comic, but also say you can skip it? Let's talk about that in today's comic book review. The artist on the book, Russell Dauterman, is definitely an artist on the rise at Marvel Comics. He came in the same Young Guns class as Marco Cicchetto, R.B. Silva, and Pepe Larraz, and they've all been really good. But in my opinion, up until this comic, I would say that Russell Dauterman was #4 on the list. He's done some really good work on Thor. He was the main artist on War of the Realms, which is a well-illustrated comic book. I just didn't think it was great. There's something about his line art. And then the color artist used a really subdued palette and it looked like watercolors and just really didn't fit his art style and his vibe very well. But here in Giant Size X-Men, Jean Grey, Emma Frost, Matthew Wilson absolutely accentuates Russell Dauterman's art so well in this comic book. Dauterman and Wilson together are like peanut butter and jelly. Marvel Comics would be crazy in the future if they didn't have Matthew Wilson coloring all of Russell Dauterman's comic books, and definitely that Giant Size X-Men Storm book we have coming up, which I imagine is probably tied into this. Until this comic, I've never really thought of Dauterman as a great visual storyteller, but like I said, this is essentially a silent issue, so it's all about the visuals, and it really feels like Dauterman takes a leap up, a step forward as far as visual storytelling. He does a great job in this comic really conveying all the actions, everything that's going on. You can see the emotions. The first read through is a little bit confusing, and we'll talk about why when we get kind of to the setting. But it's certainly not on the artist part. I think it was just the story that was being told. This is a comic that you probably need to read twice to fully kind of comprehend or get everything that's going on, because it doesn't really make sense until the very end. But Dauterman is definitely, in top form. I would say his visuals in here actually, kind of exceed what R.B. Silva and Pepe Larraz have actually done in X-Men so far, including House of X Powers of 10, which I loved. So this is a great showing on Dauterman's part. Just a beautifully illustrated comic book issue. And the art in this comic book is great. I rate it 4.5 out of 5. As far as the story and characterization go, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because there's no dialogue in this comic book. So I'm going to do the best that I can to kind of characterize and talk about the things I like without giving away the whole plot. But I am going to have to give a lot of it away, to be completely honest, just to do the review because it's a unique comic book. Jonathan Hickman's Giant Size X-Men Jean Grey Emma Frost starts out, with a couple of kids playing on Krakoa. We get those nice visuals that were done in the previews. They see something land on the island They go and they investigate, and there's Storm on the ground, who appears to have some blood, coming out of her head, possibly her nose. And then we jump to the next page, and there is a portal with a message in Krakoan text. I deciphered it. It says, "Silence, psychic rescue in progress." And after that, we see Jean Grey and Emma Frost enter into this portal for this psychic rescue. And as I understand it, they actually enter the mind of Storm. It does take you it does take you several pages to kind of get your bearings and kind of figure out what's going on, especially if you didn't decipher the text yourself and you weren't aware that there's a psychic rescue going on. One of the best parts about the comic book is when Emma Frost and Jean Grey first start encountering some of the creatures or apparitions or whatever you want to call them that are in Storm's mind. They take the form of, African beasts, in this case, lions. And they're somewhat communicating telepathically, but we also see some smoke comes up and it says friends. And the lions recognize Jean Grey. There's kind of an embrace, a hug. So there's some characterization that's really well done there. That even though Storm is unconscious, she recognizes who Jean Grey is, or at least who her mental projection is, and she embraces her. She recognizes her as a friend. But an even better moment is when Storm kind of investigates Emma Frost, and immediately she turns into like a serpent and tries to attack her because her mind, her soul, her spirit, recognize that Emma Frost is not a good person, and maybe she doesn't like her very much. So I did enjoy that. I thought it was a great reaction and really good characterization, as far as what's in the mind of Storm, because we know that Emma Frost and Storm have been working together a bit, in Marauders, because she's part of that Marauders team that's working with the Hellfire Club. So I really did enjoy that. I thought that was a good reveal and definitely the most fun part of the comic book. While this is going on, like I said, you realize you're in Storm's mind. Jean Grey, Emma Frost, they see this big tree in the background, and then there's Storm's, headdress, kind of waiting up there above the tree, signaling that that's maybe where her spirit is. And then there's kind of a dust storm, and things are kind of kicking up to keep them out of there. The two of them approach the tree. We see Storm for the first time. Her face is kind of within the storm, but with the headdress above her. And they finally enter this tree, which apparently, the way I take it, encloses the spirit or maybe the soul of Storm, at least within her mind. Now this leads to probably the most interesting part when they come in there and we see an egg, very reminiscent of an egg that would have been formed by the Five and used in the resurrection process. But the other interesting thing we see is the technovirus that is surrounding it, and creeping into the egg and somewhat infecting it. Now, this looks really similar to what happened to Krakoa the first time that Cypher visited, and he touched the leaves with his hand, and we started seeing some of that technovirus appear to maybe infect Krakoa. That has to be related. There's a reason they look so similar, and I really like how that ties back into House of X Powers of 10. Or maybe if it's not a direct tie-in, it's some connective tissue, visual connective tissue to let you know there's something going on here. Maybe these things will all connect in the end. And I really like that. And like I said, we do have the egg that is, symbolic of the Five and the resurrection process that's on Krakoa. Eventually, they do open the egg. There is a flower in bloom. When they do that, they grab the flower, they yank on it, and up from the ground comes these... They look like teeth to me, like the mouth of a dragon. 2 circles of teeth come out of the ground, and there comes Storm. It's the first time Jean Grey and Emma Frost see her, somewhat physically. This isn't her mind, but this is the first time they've seen the physical apparition of Storm, and you can see Jean Grey is very happy. Emma Frost, not so much. She's very skeptical. You can tell in her face that she doesn't know what's happening right here. And that's where the big reveal happens. That's basically the only really important thing that comes out of this. We do learn that Storm is infected with, a technovirus of some sort. It has something to do with the Children of the Vault. And there is a time limit on her life. They have a certain time period, 30 days to be exact, to save Storm before she falls to this virus. Or at least that's the way I interpret it. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. There's like a countdown clock and things of that nature. It was a very interesting reveal, a very cool concept, very well executed throughout. Not a ton of characterization in this comic book because it's a silent issue. You know, it's almost all action, it's reaction, things like that. But I think that Hickman and Dauterman work together very well to add some characterization as far as when the apparitions in Storm's mind finally meet up with Jean Grey and Emma Frost, and the way they react to them, I thought was really cool. They added some characterization as far as how Storm really feels deep down inside of her mind. Of course, we also get some characterization as far as the children of the vault, maybe some of this technovirus. So I think that was all really effective. But there's not a ton of it, and it is hard to fit that into a comic book like this. So I will rate the characterization, a 3.5 out of 5. The plot itself, it's cool. It's a fun read. Like I said, you're probably going to have to read it twice. And I do think that Hickman and Dauterman used the silent issue concept very well. Not the best silent issue I've ever read in my life. And the plot is easy enough to understand. Once you finally get to the end, it kind of clarifies some of the stuff that you read before. And you could go back and understand the plot a lot better. I'll also rate that a 3.5 out of 5. I think Hickman, did a good job with this story, but it was all on Russell Dauterman and Matthew Wilson in this comic issue, and those two definitely stepped up to the plate. So let's kind of wrap this comic book up and into this review. I really do enjoy this comic book. I love silent issues. This is a good silent issue, actually a pretty damn good silent issue. Not the best one I've ever seen because it isn't, really action-packed. But what does happen is interesting. It is executed very well on Dauterman's part. Like I said, it's confusing until you get to the end, but Russell Dauterman is absolutely the star of the show here. He and Matthew Wilson really made Dauterman's work look like $1 million here. It's very vibrant. It's beautiful to look at. Dauterman definitely takes a leap forward, a step up in my mind as far as a visual storyteller. I think he really owned this issue. As far as I'm concerned, it's the best comic book I've ever seen him illustrate, and he just did a phenomenal job. With that being said, if you talk to your friend that read this comic book, you can basically get the gist of it in a few sentences. There's not a whole lot going on here. There's not a huge amount of implications or events that you have to read this comic book to understand. Storm arrived on the island. She's sick. They went and investigated. She's been infected with a technovirus via the children of the vault. She has 30 days to live. And that's what this comic book tells you. Like I said, you can skip that, especially if you value story over art. You might not enjoy this, but if you value art over story, this is absolutely your comic book because the art, the visual storytelling is absolutely fantastic. I'm more in the middle. I generally tend to prefer a good story over good art, but I love it when I get both. In this case, I highly recommend it, but you can absolutely skip it because in the big scheme of things, this isn't the most informative comic issue you'll ever buy. The recent issues of X-Men, X-Force, X-Men Fantastic Four, Wolverine have all had way bigger stakes and more implications as far as the big X-Men world go. But this is a good comic book that you can absolutely skip if you're an X-Men fan. And you don't want to spend that $5 price tag because that is a lot of money to spend for just really good artwork and not a whole lot of story. Hopefully I've contradicted myself or maybe confused you enough during this comic book review. It's a little bit different. This is the first time I've ever actually reviewed a silent issue. I do like doing, what I call new classic reviews, and maybe I will review that Matt Kit Ninja K issue for that series for the next time I'm on vacation or something like that. Thank you so much for joining me, and be on the lookout for tomorrow's review of X-Men number 7. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.